Okay, folks, let's continue on. We're going to Casabella, me and you, for a meal, she smiled to herself. After all, Casabella was an Italian restaurant right in the centre of town, on a cross-section of two roads, Victoria Street and Stanley Street, and just a hair's breadth from Matthew Street, where the famous cavern, home of the Beatles, used to be. And she herself was half Italian. Then, she continued, we'll find somewhere to have a drink and a dance. Who knows, girl? We might meet a couple of nice fellas. She winked as she said this, and Jane smiled. How can I refuse? What time do you want me in my glad rags? Around 7. That'll give us plenty of time to eat our meal and do ourselves some fishing. She winked again. Jane got the feeling she would have her hands full tonight, one way or the other. She said goodbye to Leanne, shut the door, and slowly went to start getting ready. She had half her wardrobe scattered around her bedroom, undecided as to what to wear. Finally, she settled on a simple pair of jeans and a glittery top. Applying makeup, she gave herself one last appraising look in the full-length mirror that hung on the wall in the hall. Well, her strawberry blonde curls sure looked pretty. She had put her hair up, and dare she admit it, she looked quite sophisticated. You'll never be beautiful, she thought to herself, but you'll have to do. She twirled round in front of the mirror, allowing herself a small smile before she heard a knock at the door and a taxi pulling up. Hi, love, said Leanne as Jane opened the door. Taxi's here. You look nice. Jane nodded as she took in what Leanne was wearing. A simple red shift dress and a touch of lip gloss was all she needed on her tanned face. So do you, replied Jane, smiling. Stepping out into the spring twilight, Jane and Leanne each took a seat in the back of the taxi. The place was comfortable. At the table towards the back window, there were a group of people who were laughing loudly. Jane smiled at them. The two girls were involved in an animated conversation as the waiter brought them their food. I took your advice, Jane told Leanne. What advice was that? I give out a lot of advice, me, replied Leanne, giving Jane a wicked grin. Yeah, said Jane with an equally wicked grin. You should be an agony aunt. She shot back quickly. No, the advice about getting onto a course at John Moore. I did it. I enrolled on a course and I start in 3 weeks. That's great, girl, replied Leanne, leaning over and patting her hand. You know, she continued, I never had a sister. Jane looked up, surprised. Neither did I. Leanne lifted her glass of wine. Sisters. Jane also lifted her glass. Sisters. Jane and Leanne walked across the city centre, past Williamson Square and toward a bar Leanne knew. They walked arm in arm, huddled against the now chilly air. Going in the door of the bar, Leanne smiled at the bouncer stood outside, who was obviously familiar to her. They found a cosy corner seat by the window and Jane went to get the drinks. So was Charlie upset when you left him with the babysitter? Asked Jane as she sipped her drink. Nah, he loves the attention she gives him, came the reply. If you don't mind my asking, Jane asked tentatively, swallowing gently, what happened to Charlie's dad? Leanne just stared at her for a moment, and Jane went red with embarrassment. Sorry, she said, putting a hand over her mouth. Me and my big mouth. Leanne merely grinned back at her. Give over, girl. No big deal. Me and Frank, Charlie's dad, were married for 3 years. He woke up one day and decided he didn't want to be a dad or a husband, and what he wanted was to jet off to Spain to live with his very own Spanish miss. Oh, I'm very sorry, said Jane quietly. Yeah, well, I'm not. Now come and not be so flaming miserable. Finish our drinks and go and have a dance. They both rose and made their way to the impressively sized dance floor. Both girls grinned as ABBA's Dancing Queen started to play. The girls screeched at the top of their lungs and began to dance energetically, as if they were the dancing queen in the song. A few songs later, and Jane and Leanne sunk back down in their seats in the cubicle by the window. I need to catch my breath, giggled Jane. So do I. Not as fit as I thought I was. Hello. Here he is. Leanne was distracted suddenly, peering out the window and smiling at someone. Jane followed her gaze, but there were so many people coming and going, it was impossible to see. Here, who is? Asked Jane with some trepidation. Just at that moment, a man walked up to their table. She was immediately drawn to his rather beautiful hazel eyes, which twinkled. He had dark hair, which looked soft and was neatly cut. He gave Leanne a warm smile as he approached. "Hi, Leanne. How are you?" Leanne jumped out of her seat and hugged the stranger. "Hello, Mitch. I'm well, thanks. How are you?" She let the stranger go at last and turned to Jane. "Jane, this here is the most gorgeous fellow in the world. This is my brother-in-law, or rather ex-brother-in-law, Mitch Adams. He's Frank's brother." Mitch in turn laughed and put his hands up in a mock surrender gesture. "Yeah, and I promise you, I'm nothing like my brother, the scally." He looked at Jane, smiling. "Hello, it's nice to meet you, girl. Leanne has been full of her brand new best friend for the past couple of days." Jane shook his hand. Her insides felt a little wobbly. He sure was very nice, she thought. She tried to look at him without him noticing, blushing furiously when he smiled back at her. Excusing themselves, the girls went to use the bathroom. Mitch smiled after the pretty young thing with the strawberry blonde hair, who was walking away from the table. She was lovely, but he would never, ever be able to pluck up the courage to ask her out.